Today we are looking at this mini 3-inch frame here. This is an HGLRC VX145 frame. I've got GEP RC motors on here, 1408 or something of that sort. But specifically what we're dealing with is this Holybro Kakute. It's an F7 Teco 32 combo stack. It comes as, the two come together as one piece. Now what our goal here is to get this in place and soldered on here well. So primarily it's a solder video. I want to talk about how to make your joints look good, or at least good enough, I guess, for this product. I do a lot of other videos on KiCad and soldering in general electronics and talk about things like how they should look for professional, for industry. I guess I feel like I want to say, yes, you should always, kind of prescribe to that type of a theory, but at the same time, I feel like I have to make allowances for people that are new to soldering, and also the solder joints, even a bad one, is most likely going to long outlast the life of this product. So kind of letting some things go a little bit. Now though, on top of that, I want to show you what I've done here up front, because obviously it's already done. I did this because the documentation, like so many other things in RC, is very slim. And in order to try to figure this out, I had to go through a little bit of some testing and guessing to try to decide which way I felt was the best way to flip this, because I could mount it this way or this way. This is the back end. Well, this is the end where the battery comes out. And, I pretty strongly suspect that it's coming out the back end here. I could be wrong, but that one I'd say pretty like 90% certain, right? So at any rate, if you do take this and you flip the wrong direction, what's the problem going to be? Well, the motors here should be numbered this way. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. So I say like a backwards N. Now, if you flip it, then it's going to be going the wrong way. And you could change that in software. You could get around to figuring out how to change that. But let's say we don't want to do that. We'd like to get it put in here first the right way so we don't have to deal with that. What I ended up doing was looking around online, trying to find the right type of wiring pattern for this. And the problem here was that this is new enough, I guess. It's not really that new, but I couldn't find even the board on the manufacturer's website, Holybro. I found one for the 35, I think it was amp, the lower amperage one. This is the 45, which you might not think is that much different, but when you look at the chips, they're laid out entirely different. And and another one. So there's like this one and two others that fell kind of into the same area, but they weren't correct. And there is this cable that has to connect. There's another cable under here, and it was on top. Well, it was on the other side on one of these. Anyways, it kind of starts stacking up to like confusion. So what I did is, first off, you get the pin out. I can't flip this one over right now at the moment, but on the connector on the other side, say this is this one, over on the side, it told you basically what the pin out was for these. And it was VBAT, telemetry, ground, current sense, and then all the four for the motors. And so once I figured that out, then I could get my multimeter out, and then I could probe to see which one of these was the power and ground. And so that was just handy. It didn't exactly tell me which direction it was going to go, but at least it was handy. And then basically, based upon one vendor's website that was pretty darn close but a little bit different, I said, you know what, I'm going to make the call and put it on here this direction. Well, at the last moment, I looked on the, I believe it was the Banggood website where I bought this from, and they didn't have any wiring diagram on there, but what they did have is a picture of the stack built. I keep losing the little rubber bumpers. And the stack was laid up like so, but they had an image that was kind of taken a little bit at the side. And again, very last moment, I noticed this little slash here. And based upon everything that I, smart brain theorized that it would sit a certain direction, they had it in the image sitting this direction. I could see these here, and then I could see these chips along the side. And this style right here is different from the other two. So I knew it was this board for sure, and that little slash right there was the big giveaway that it had been flipped over. So I said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go with what that picture says and put it together, which is also why I'm here with this already done. I've already tested this to make sure it works, which is a thing we'll be doing at the end of the video. We'll test it with the ESCs for just a simple beep code, and then you can put the flight control board on here, wire this in here, and then I can go into beta flight and I can plug in the battery and I can turn on motor 1 or motor 2, whichever one I want. But I turn on motor 1 and this one does spin. So this is here with this slash on the top, this being ground on this side, this being positive, this is the proper direction for this board. So I wanted to just tell you that right off the get-go because there's no longer any confusion as to which direction this is supposed to go. So then what I'm going to do is rewind all this and start the video then from the beginning where we go through the solder tutorial and the little bit of testing. If there are any words along the way that is myself, speaking to any confusion as to whether or not I hope that I've got this thing mounted the right direction, I have, of course, since then figured this out. Okay, rewind. I'm going to leave these on here loose, but I'll snug them up just a little bit more. This particular frame has a little bit of it's more of a slot, so you can slide around to get it to fit better. For now, for just this preliminary stack up, I'm going to leave them loose, and once I get them in position, I know they're good, then I'll tighten them down. So first up is going to be your ESC. So you drop this down here. Then the next thing is going to be our flight control board, and it has these longer silicone rubber standoffs that are inside the flight control board itself. So that's great. The primary reason for them, if you didn't know this, is that this chip right here is the accelerometer on this board, and we need to try to dampen all the outside vibration, especially, come from the motor's propeller and all that kind of stuff. Isolate that from getting here so we can just deal with attitude. So we'll go ahead and place this on here. Okay, so then you look on the side here, squish, squish. It's okay. And then how are we going to put this on here? Well, the camera's going to go up front. So this is going to sit here, but we're going to need some kind of a spacer that is going to keep this off of that USB. So this is kind of a critical thing right here. We do not want things touching any of the metal, so we have to find a fastener that will keep it off of this, but we're running out of room right there. So let's see what we have. Oh, well, we got this guy right here. So if I take this and smash this down, we'll stick that on there, and then possibly so that will go, and there you have it. So that'll work. So this is staying away, and I can squish this down a bit, as you can see, so I could get some nuts on here and tighten them down, but don't wrench them down completely tight, because again, we don't want to compress the rubber bumpers right here so much to where they're not isolating any longer. So here are some of the fasteners. These ones, I think the small plastic ones, I think they came from the frame kit actually. But these ones here, the nylock nuts, are the ones you're going to want to use, and you should make sure that you've got enough room. I mean, we've got plenty. You can see already we've got plenty to throw these on here. And now these are nice. If you have these as an option, use these over the plastic ones because they're going to hold better. They're not going to come off under vibration, which I've had these fly off quite frequently, okay? Just be careful that there's no components around where you're putting a metal fastener that it's going to make contact with and cause issues. There's a couple things that are close, but we'll deal with that later, okay? So I've assessed, and I have came to the conclusion that we are okay. This stack is going to be okay as is, and now I can start pulling things apart, and then we can get to the soldering. That seems to be kind of the hardest part out of the way. Now we get into well, the reasonably hard part, depending upon what your solder skills are. So we're going to take our XT30 connector here, and we have to solder that onto the back end, and we have to cut this to the right size so we have just, you know, enough to where you can connect to the battery, but not so long that it's flapping around and getting stuck in the propeller. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we solder the motor wires on here. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. Okay, now what you do want to watch out for is bridging, and you definitely want to watch out for any solder dripping down and making contact, but we've got lots of clearance underneath here now with this particular setup that I have. Other boards not so much. The other thing you're going to notice is as we get in here to soldering these pads here, the power and ground very frequently are part of an inner flood plane. So for example, the power, this is probably about a 6-layer board, and so somewhere in the middle here there might be one full plane that is nothing but, you know, copper that's connected to this pad right here, and the same with ground flooding all over. Not these guys. So you could go happily along soldering all these on, no big deal, but you go to solder on one of these and all of a sudden it feels like maybe your soldering iron's not on, or it just started to die, and it's, you know, it's not melting the solder the way you want. And the problem here is that this pad, that flood zone, is pulling away all the heat from your iron, and it's being a very large heat sink. So what you might need to do is, one, here's the tiny tip that I use for, you know, pads like this, but you might want to change out to a larger one or just turn up the heat on your soldering iron. Okay, first problem first. How long should we make this? Well, I'm going to take this, turn it over like this, and say, okay, if the battery is down here, that might be good. I can just say from doing this before, that's probably going to be fine. This full length like this, not so good. I don't want to have this connected to the battery and this loop getting up here in the air like so, because that's definitely going to be a problem. This would probably be sufficient. If I grab my battery here and I take this, let's see if I can do this without losing everything. If this sits like this, then this connects like this, and I could end up having a bit of a loop there. That could be a deal. But what I also do is I'll turn the battery around and have it back like this, and then this can connect like so. And that works out really good as well. Having said that, put this here like so. Set this up. 80 millimeters. How about that? Well, let's stretch this out. Give us enough room to clip it. Yeah, let's say 80 millimeters. If you guys like a number, that seems like a good value. So I'm going to take this. I guess this is commit. Grab your cutters. Okay, this will sit just like so. When it comes to stripping these, this heavier gauge, you can, of course, use your wire strippers, because why wouldn't you? Because that's what they're for. But the silicone wire, you can do a pretty good job of just grabbing it and stripping it with a fingernail if you got them. So that's kind of nice. And I feel that it's less risk of cutting any of the fibers inside here, any of the little wires. Twist these up really good. Make sure they're kind of even, otherwise, you know, they're going to make it kind of sit funny here. So we're going to solder this on, but before I do this, I might want to throw some shrink tube on here if you have some. So if you have some shrink tube, now would be a good time to throw that on here if you like. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I grab my little thing here, and back in a minute. So what I'm going to do first is, again, I've got these nice and twisted up, going to dunk them over here into the flux, and this is the tinning. So get my solder here. I'll zoom in a second, but I want you to be able to see the entirety of all this. So I'm going to get a lot of solder on here, and I'm going to lay it right on the top and let it sizzle and soak in to the strands of wire. Then I'm going to do the same for the other. I am trying to do my best, by the way, right now, to keep this in frame, but I don't want to do this over the top of the board. That drip that you maybe could see on the soldering iron, if that falls down onto there, that's going to be pretty difficult for most people to clean up. So make sure that all of your clipping, trimming, and soldering and all that stuff is done wherever possible away from this area. So this is good. So that will fit right there. But if you can notice, it's a little bit too long. So I'm going to go ahead and grab these and trim them down. Just a little bit. So this is what I was talking about. Do this. Keep it away from the board. And then that'll be better. So the wires are tinned and clipped. They're just a little bit shorter than the pads. Now the next thing we need to do is come in here and tin the pads. So we need to get a blob of solder on those because we don't want to have to try to bring this in here, and somehow or another get this all in here all at the same time and start dumping a load of solder there. So we try to get some there first. Now what you can do is you can just go for it and just heat this up and start bringing this in. But here's where, you know, some soldering 101 comes into play here. If I first get my little paintbrush here and some flux smeared on here, it will clean it a little bit, which will help the solder flow. Now there's already flux inside the solder, and so that might be good enough, and maybe you could use it. But if you find that your solder pads are not, that the solder is not flowing out to all the corners of them, this is the problem. Now the next thing I want to do though is that thing when I was talking about the pad itself being a ground plane or a flooded plane. I'm going to heat it up a bit. You're not going to damage anything. My soldering iron is set at 830 degrees, which is damn hot. Pretty hot. Now you see how that flows like there? Now watch. If I just let it sit, you might see it flow out a little bit more. But this is what I want to do first. I want to get it all over the pad so I have that like that. That's important. So then we do the same thing to here. Feed it in, move it around. You can see it cooling off pretty quickly there as I even just move away from it. So we get that. All your solder joints should look round, basically shiny. You know, that's relative to what type of solder you're actually using. And no little spikes coming out of them. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to need to do is I need to solder this into here, but I need a little bit more solder. So I'm going to pick up as much as I can on the tip to carry some over to here. That blob that hangs off here will also end up being, you know, as hot as the soldering iron is, and it will create, instead of being a flat soldering iron, now I'm going to have a little ball that will help form to that round area right there, and it will transfer heat better. So first, I go here, grab some more flux, and put this all over it there. I might even come over here and dunk the wires in some flux. Grab, like I said, a whole pile of solder. Get this sitting where it's supposed to sit. Sit on the top for a little while. I am not pressing on it. I'm just trying to heat it up, and I'm going to sneak around there and warm the pad up, and then pull away and stay still for about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds because it's damn hot. Like I said, you got to heat this thing up so good it's going to retain the heat for a while. So that is going to be an issue as well. You might notice that these are kind of kinked. I do this on purpose. So I'm trying to kink this one here, bend this one over like this so that they'll just sort of lay where they're supposed to without me having to try to hold it there while I'm dealing with all this other stuff. Okay, so we'll do this again. Another blob on here. Oh, it dripped. Lost it. I'll take this, put it on the top, heat that up, let it flow down to the bottom. Again, you might sneak your iron over to the side to get that to heat up a bit. Wait, 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 wait. Ouch, ouch, ouch. And you see that? That's not so good. I need a little bit more solder and I need a little bit more flux. Now, Is it not so good as it's bad? Well, no, it's really pretty fine, I guess. You know, it's going to survive the lifetime of the vehicle, but I want to try to do better. So I'll take some of this again. And now I'm also going to hold the wire with my pliers here because it does get really hot. It's also very slippery, so make sure you can manage it okay. Heat this up. You do not want ice cream cones, like double stacked ice cream cones. You don't want a blob on a blob, so I want to hold the thing on here to get it to all melt and become homogeneous. Stay still. And that's probably okay. Alright, so this is first and foremost. You want to try to get this on here really nicely, like so. You're going to heat the thing up. If I were to touch even over here, I bet it's... yeah, these capacitors, everything, I mean, they're most likely bypass caps over here, but they're one leg on power, one leg on ground, and somewhere or another. Anyways, they're on this plane and they're going to get heated up. Everything on here is pretty much too hot to touch right now. That's okay. It's part of the deal. It's not going to damage anything. Okay, so if you did good with that, I would probably say it's downhill from here. This was problematic because it's a big pad, it's a large thermal mass with a large wire. So that's an issue there, and you got to hold it on a long time so you start developing heat. You got to get your pliers out here to hold it so you don't burn yourself, so you got that. The next hard issue though is that things get kind of tiny. So that's a bit it could be a bit problematic for some people. Now what I want to do though, before I get started here, I want to manage these wires and kind of figure out where they're going to lie. I might even go so far as to tape these down first, and this is your call. Depends upon how much you want to try to manage the wires here like this. You've got kind of a tight corner to work around right here, as opposed to letting them be loose and you can hold on to it really well like this and then put them back. Let's try taping. Let's see how that works. So, I'll find some tape here. What color is this guy going to be? Red? Is it red? Is it always red? Red or white? Oh, geez. Guess we got to go with red. The roll's bigger. So probably about that much should be okay. Don't cut your fingers off. Lay the wires down nice and flat. Tape over the top a little bit and tape it to the bottom so it gives you something to anchor onto, and then pull it taut. Wrap it, wrap it. Yeah, there we go. So that little guy is all set up. Now we can get our tweezers. So if you have any like this, instead of being the really sharp tweezers like I was pointing with earlier, these ones will help you manage these fine wires better. You can use these, they're just a little bit big. Okay, so first off, I'm going to take this one, I'm going to give it a little bit of a turn, and I'm going to solder it right to there. Now, do I want to leave myself some excess just in case for later? No, this is not how we do this. We don't really leave big piles of excess. One huge reason, I mean, if you want to go crazy and stuff it somewhere, you can, I guess, but I don't want to have any exposed wire that a twig or anything like this, a branch that you're diving underneath a tree and everything looks good, but there's a little tiny bit of some wispy little branches in there. They're going to hook through these wires and eat up your quad. So everything's short as. So I'm going to take this. It's going to go right about there, and I figure out where I'm going to cut it. Right, like so. That's even a little bit long. But that's okay. I'm going to strip it, tin it, and then I'll trim it back to the right place. So this is where it's going to get stripped back to. Just like so. I'm going to zoom in a minute. I just want you to see the overall here. So twist this up. And then if you want to, if you've got some flux like this, you can kind of try to dunk it into it. Be very careful if you're used to doing that. It's something, you know, I kind of do quite frequently, but you do not, absolutely do not want anything to cause that twisted wire to fray out, like dunking it into the solder or touching it lightly with your finger before you get it tinned, because it will maybe possibly make contact to the pad next to it, and then you're going to fry a motor. Okay, tin that. Keep your tip nice and clean. I'll take this, say that's going to sit about there, and take it off to the side, right? Take it off to the side of the drone, clip it down short, a little bit shorter. I don't know if I cut it much. That'll probably, maybe even a little bit shorter. Oops, too short. Okay, so that'll work. Now, these have got little holes in them. Don't put them in the holes. You kind of want to surface mount everything. Even if they do have larger holes that it looks like it's designed to do through hole, leave them on the top because it makes it a lot easier to fix, repair, do whatever to later down the road. So, as we did before, I'm going to come by here. I'm going to tin this pad. I'm going to get some flux on it. Then I'm going to tin it like so. This one you won't have to heat up so much. Just kind of put a blob on there. Let it sit for a second. Pull it off. Nice shiny little blob. Maybe even a little bit more. There you go. That's a good blob. And then a little bit more flux because I just got rid of that. Now, again, there is flux inside here, but I'm going to pick it up and take it over here and watch. See that smoke? That's the flux. So it's pretty much all gone now. So that's why we need to do this. So I'm going to take this, get some stuff out of the way, and hold it here. You want to make sure that you can hold this and you have it very managed in your hand with the tweezers. Some people, they try to hold it in place with the soldering iron, and that never fares well because it just moves away as soon as you get done. So heat it up, let it sink to the bottom, heat it up, take it away, 1, 2, 3, let it solidify. That's what your joint should look like. Nice little homogeneous ball, not a little double, triple stacked, you know, snow cone, and no spikes. If you start to pull the thing away and you're seeing little spikes everywhere, that's this. Add some flux, do it again, everything will be fine. Okay, I think I can work around this. So I've got the camera sitting on the table, so sorry if I bump it, things are going to get kind of shaky. What I'm going to do first is move down the road a little bit quicker. So we're going to run some flux down here on these. I'll just do this side here. Grab my solder, get in here, get that on there, get a blob in there, but let it heat up a little bit. Ooh, do you see that one? That one almost dripped down. That's a little bit much. But you might notice, I don't know if you can see this in the camera or not, you know, but as you're watching it, you'll kind of learn when you need to use flux and maybe when you don't, and also when you need to use your heat. So as I'm doing this, I'm setting it on here, and if I just, you know, okay, that was a little bit silly, but, you know, I mean, it doesn't have time to flow around. So you heat it up, let it sit a little bit, it flows everywhere, then it'll be better. Okay, so those are all done. Then I'm going to get these sized up, stripped and tinned. So we got them all taped up. Just keep going around here. Same. leave yourself maybe a little extra length. I got really pretty short on this one. Managed to get it there, but you know, make sure for everything I said about the service loop, or the excess, right? A little bit longer than shorter would be better, I guess. So these ones, just go ahead and clip them. Well, that's everything. Now, before you plug this in to try to test it, well, by the way, you might not know that you could do that now, but you could without the flight control board. Before you plug this in, make sure that you clean the crap out of this thing. Make sure that this is super clean. So I have a little bottle of alcohol here. You could use some wipes. They have alcohol wipes. It's going to be kind of difficult with this, but don't use alcohol wipes that have any kind of hand lotion in them or anything like that. I have an acid brush here that I've clipped end off here, and then get in here and clean and clean and clean. Wipe it off. So you're going to take all the flux that's there, and imagine you're picking it up with the brush and moving it away. So this here, in here you kind of see me kind of working and picking at this. The synthetic flux, this stuff here, cleans up really nicely. But the flux that's inside most of your solder is organic, and it burns down to kind of a tar, and it sticks on it, and then, well, past that, then it burns to carbon, which is conductive, so that's, of course, another issue. But, oh, get out of there. You want to really make sure you get that out of there because it's stuck on really good. And on all these close traces, this right in here, I have seen this fry because it's frying the flux. The flux became conductive. And then here, here goes nothing. Here is the moment of truth to make sure that we put this together right. Yay! So the board here has no lights. There's no lights on it to tell us that it's working, but it will do the first portion of our beep code signaling. So the cute little music that the drones play, da-da-da, dun-dun, okay? So it's in pieces here. So the first da-da-da is just giving powers to the motor, saying I'm turned on, essentially. It might mean more than this, but this is the way I take it. And then the second half is the flight control board giving back the kind of the, you know, all good signal. So you're not going to hear the last two beeps. You're just going to hear the dit-dit-dit. So I'm going to take this, and when you plug it in, just be very ready to unplug it if anything doesn't happen. So watch about how long this takes. Ready? Now. That's it. Okay, so barely a second, maybe not even a second. Yeah, half a second or so, okay? If you get no beeps, unplug the damn thing. Then to review everything we've done so far, what you want to pay attention to probably first and foremost is that your solder blobs are nice and homogeneous. They're all completely one piece, not like a little snowman. You can notice over here where we had the, you know, there's a lot of heat dissipation right here. So you can see that there's some ringlets here and right here and right here. And this is where the cold front of the solder didn't remelt, wasn't able to melt the lower layers. But, you know, this we already talked about. We had problems there that we had to deal with. Over here shouldn't be a problem melting all the lower layers. So make sure that happens. Make sure that you're not getting any little spikes out of here. If you're getting any spikes, just little peaks as you pull the soldering iron away, you need flex. You got to add some flex to it. That'll stop that. Make sure that your wires are completely covered by the solder. You don't want to have little pieces of wire sticking up out of your solder joint like a little fossil. So make sure they're completely covered there as well. And then the shiny, you want to see a shiny solder joint because that's going to tell us that we had no oxidized upper layers there, which is again also flux. So flux is keeping the oxides away from the surface, at least temporarily. We know, well, the thing is molten. And then probably lastly, make sure that everything is very, very clean, because flux, especially the organic flux, can be conductive over time. And any of the flux, for the most part, is acidic, and it's going to start corroding the metal over time. So that's the other reason we want to keep this nice and clean. Then lastly, from a quality QA testing milestone, the testing of the motors at this point was a strong critical element. You want to try to break up the testing of your components into as many small pieces as possible. Now, I didn't go so far as creating a motor test jig to test the motors before we installed, because I didn't think that was necessary, but in a larger system you might do something like that. My point here is we have our 4in1 ESC. We have big power coming into it, and that big power goes, yes, out to the motors, but if we did something wrong here and this starts frying, that could cause damage to our flight control board, our video transmitter, our camera, our receiver, everything down the way. So it's important to find spots like this where you can do your testing and we know that this part at this point is working as it should. If it wasn't and it blew up, then we blew up this piece and not everything else.